Welcome to another episode of Elders Words of Wisdom, a podcast from the National Resource Center for Alaska Native Elders. This month I spoke with Paula Jones, an Alaska Native student pursuing her bachelor's degree in human services here at UAA. We talked about elders in her life, her relationship with them, and how they helped guide and support her while growing up in Alaska. Here's Paula.
Well, I was born in Bethel, Alaska, and moved out to Quinnahock, Alaska, actually, when I was like a week old. Quinnahock is about 85 miles southwest of Bethel.
Growing up in a small village was a unique experience, as Paula remembers.
I grew up in a completely Yupik community. Everyone spoke Yupik. So Yupik was the first language I learned. I was around my grandparents a lot. And so I was really brought up in the traditional Yupik Eskimo values. And it was just a very traditional Yupik family, living off the land.
When she was 8 years old, Paula moved with her mother to Anchorage, where she says the difference in lifestyle was a challenge.
I think the most difficult part of me moving was being away from my family. Not having that sense of community, that family to look back on. No friends, and definitely a new way of living. It was a culture shock.
After high school, when she was 19, Paula moved back to Quinnahock for 3 years with her grandparents.
Being around elders from my community, especially my grandparents, really just help me understand my roots. You know, they show me the right way to live. You know, they're non-judgmental. They're there to talk to you about things that their grandparents taught them, that their grandparents taught them. So it goes back generations, the things that they're teaching you and the values that they say are so important.
Fast forward a few years. Paula is now a single mother living back in Anchorage, and when her daughter was 4, Paula began to have some personal struggles.
I went through depression. I was just really lost, confused about what to do with my life. And I ended up in legal trouble during that time. It's the first time that I've ever had to be away from my daughter. A few months after things settled down, you know, I was still, not quite right. I wasn't really comprehending what was going on. And I had family and friends notice a change in my behavior. Somewhere down the line, we ended up going to the doctor, found out that I actually had a very large mass in my brain. I actually ended up going through a 16-and-a-half-hour operation where I lost my hearing. The entire the right side of my face was completely paralyzed. It was during that time that my grandma actually moved. We moved my grandma to Anchorage. At that point, she was a widow. She was about 80 years old and just couldn't bear the winters out in Quinnahock any longer. So my parents moved her in. And we ended up really being a support system for one another. At that point, I could do stuff on my own, but very carefully. And she was the same way. You know, she had a walker as well. But was still able to move around and get things done. And during that time, I know she just kind of brought me back to reality. You know, she talked about her upbringing. She talked a lot about forgiveness of self and others, and how important family was, how important tradition was. And we did that for 2 years as I was recovering.
Those moments Paula spent with her grandmother during that time mirrors the lessons she learned from elders when she was younger living in Quinnahock.
It's all about community, working together as a community, working together as a family in order to provide for each other, to always be there to help one another out. You know, no matter what circumstances we face or what hardships we go through, that the elders from our Native community are always there to lend a supportive hand, to talk us through it. And I just think it's really important that our younger generation keeps the connection going with elders, so that we can then, when we become the elders, can pass that down to the younger generation.
A thank you to Paula for talking to me this month. This episode marks the finale of our first season of the podcast, but we're working on something exciting for season 2, which you'll probably see at the beginning of next year. To keep informed, follow us on Facebook. Until then, I'm Thomas Moore. Thanks for listening.